Washington Wizards general manager Will Dawkins joined the Sports Junkies today. What does he think about the Wizards' 11-game losing streak, the players-only meeting, and some more? Let's find out today what he said on Locked On Wizards.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
DC family, you're locked on to the Washington Wizards. We're part of our family. We thank you for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the nation. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started alongside the DC Sports content creating savant Abdullah Ayubi. I'm Ben Strober, and I cover DC Sports for 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. AB, happy Tuesday. What's going on, man?
Yep. Since October 13th, Ben, shout out to Pete Haley from NBCS, the Commanders and Wizards have played 19 games, and they are 1-18. So right now, as a DC sports fan, like I mentioned, the Spirit, they're carrying the town. The Hokies also hired James Franklin. Happy about that. Hopefully that'll be a turning point for football. But for the Wizards, it's the same old story. We're hoping to get a win soon.
Hopefully. We're going to preview Wizards and Timberwolves, which takes place tomorrow night from Minnesota. That'll be in the third and final segment. We'll get in a little bit to Will Riley being recalled to the Washington Wizards. Will Dawkins had some comments on him, which we'll bring up when we get to that. We'll talk about the state of the point guard position here in D.C., but let's start things off with Will Dawkins joining the Junkies today. So it's kind of been a bi-weekly bit with the radio station, Abdullah, where it'll be Will Dawkins one week, the next week it'll be Brian Keefe. This week it was Will Dawkins, and kind of a fitting time to have the general manager of the team on, with the team on an 11-game losing streak, a players-only meeting, people starting to question, or people starting to not believe in what this organization is trying to build. So no one better to have on to maybe calm some of your concerns than Will Dawkins himself. One of the things that really stood out to me early on in this interview, AB, is from the get-go, he said, I admit, we got to be a lot more competitive in these games. We find ourselves in these situations where we see a lot of our young talent developing. We see guys making these individual efforts. But in order to see them compete at the highest level, they need to compete at a higher level throughout the entirety of the game. The way he brought it up with the defense, he was kind of saying, yeah, we see some real good moments defensively, but those haven't turned into full quarters, full halves, and full games. And if we can't make that happen, we're not getting the best experience for our young guys overall. So I'm glad to see him still preaching that is the message, that they do want to compete. You kind of figured he would say something like that. You're not going to expect him to be like, this is what we wanted. We wanted to lose by 25 every single game. We anticipate losing by double digits at home to the worst team in basketball. It's all part of the plan or whatever. It is part of the plan at the end of the day for Dawkins, but he does reiterate those same points about competitiveness, that it hasn't quite been acceptable to the standard so far.
And that's what they were preaching going into this season, Ben, that every game needs to be competitive, whether it's the worst team in the league or the best team in the league. And hasn't been like that so far. And that was very apparent against the Brooklyn Nets, where there were times where they were making a run, but then Brooklyn would call a timeout, and then their adjustments, Washington could not answer to them. And honestly, it's a tough position that you're put in as a GM, a young GM who wants to rebuild from the ground up, from what he was dealt with, the Bradley Beal contract, the whole dilemma of trying to figure out what's the future for this Washington franchise, to now where it's the whole idea of keeping that top 8 pick. A lot of young guys on the squad. You also have some veterans sprinkled along with Middleton and McCollum, and you want them to be traded so you can get some assets for them. And a lot of fans, we talked about how in the Nets game we heard someone yell out, "I wish I was a Hornets fan." It's frustration, and everyone on social media wanted Coach Brian Keefe to be fired. We understand, but some people, at least fans, I hope they still realize that the whole idea of this season was to not win a lot of games, but I understand the frustration about not being competitive, and that's one thing that Will Dawkins, I love that he emphasized, that the competitiveness defensively. I mean, even the Junks, JP, talked about how we draft defensive players. You got Bilal Coulibaly, Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr, who individually are doing good, but as a team, they're just not gelling together, and maybe, hopefully, we'll see that like last season where they played better in the second half of the season.
It's funny because I see some of the tweets that people bring up and say, we got some like good individual talent on this team. The guys you mentioned, Sarr, George, Bilal, Trey Johnson, who's trying to make a name for himself. But it seems like this team, when they step out on the floor, has never played a second of basketball together. It's like they met up at LA Fitness and are just running fives on the floor. And I get that vibe because sometimes they look out of sync offensively. They don't communicate well enough defensively. But maybe that's just the byproduct of having a team full of guys that are under 24 years old. I think 60% of the minutes, Will Dawkins said today, come from guys 22 or younger. So that's a big portion of your minutes going to guys with with a lack of experience, a better way to say it, for this Wizards team. When you go out there on a night, when you're playing up against an experienced squad, I know Brooklyn doesn't really fall into the category, even though some of the better players on that Brooklyn team right now are a little bit older than some of our young Wizards players, but you're going to take on a Minnesota team that's a lot more experienced on Wednesday. Even a team like Houston that's still relatively young got a lot more experience under its belt that's got through that rebuild. So the Wizards are definitely seeing those growing pains, and Dawkins said it was anticipated. It was kind of expected. But another thing I wanted to bring up was when he was asked the question about head coach Brian Keefe, how he's assessed his performance, what he's made of the terrible defense the Wizards have played, on pace to have the worst point differential in NBA history. He said a big reason why he thinks they're so bad defensively right now is because they're playing so many different guys within these rotations. And he said part of the reason why they play so many guys on any given night, playing like 11 to 12 players sometimes, is because that's kind of what he directs from the top. He said at the end of the day, the coaching staff does dictate the rotations, but they do have conversations about certain guys they'd like to see in certain situations, so that plays a hand in what they have in rotation. Dawkins said that you might see the rotation start to shrink, which is going to get really interesting because you have a super crowded room on the wing right now. You've seen minutes for guys like Cam Whitmore dwindle as time has gone on, and it's kind of been it's been up and down in terms of minutes for Whitmore. He had the 4-game stretch where he was getting practically no minutes, and then he comes back and has his 2 best performances, but since then he hasn't played a lot of minutes since then. So hopefully we still see him be a feature in the rotation. Corey Kispert, the minutes have been kind of inconsistent. Sometimes he plays a lot, sometimes not as much. It's going to be interesting to see if they cut down that rotation, if it really does make a difference in the way they play team defense. Because Dawkins said that's part of the problem is they have too many different guys that are playing within different lineups. They don't have a lot of experience playing in those lineups together, and maybe that's why they're not communicating. They're not on a string, and they're not getting those stops that they need in order to compete. So I'm interested to see how that plays out as we move along here. If he says the rotations are going to shrink down, that means we're probably going to see that at some point pretty soon.
Yeah, I would describe the Cam Whitmore experience so far, Ben, very much roller coaster like you mentioned early on the season. First couple of games we didn't see much of him, and Wizards fans were saying, we traded for this man, he is special, he is athletic. Then you see in that Pistons game where he had 19 points, a poster over Jalen Duren, you're at an all-time high, and some games after where it's just like, where's the contribution? And at times could be a black hole on offense when the lack of ball movement is just very apparent when he's on the floor, especially when he gets the ball. And for Corey Kispert, the whole idea of him being here long term, I just don't think it's going to happen. I do think he's going to be dealt. I don't know if it's going to be the deadline or the end of the season. He is on a friendly contract. This year, I love the aggressiveness that he brings going into the lane. The three-point shooting has been good as well. Will Riley, a guy who's sent to the G League, did pretty good and we'll talk about it back and forth probably that we'll see for the rest of the season. I want to see him get more minutes because he's just so young. And again, he was a first-round pick from this draft class. Jameer Watkins and Malachi Branham, there are games where you see Jameer go in, and like you saw against Cleveland, where he was given the assignment of guarding Donovan Mitchell. Malachi Branham can go in there and give you some nice minutes, but that up and down inconsistency of trying to find a good rotation hasn't been clear, and we're hoping that within these next couple of weeks we figure out who's that 9 to 10 man rotation and who's going to be the odd man out. I don't know if I think it's too soon to say if I had to give a prediction, but for the guard room at least, Ben, and I know he has a big fan club, but I just want to see what you have in A.J. Johnson. I mean, I understand he's not prime Chris Paul, but last season he gave you some good minutes in games where obviously they weren't going to be competing for going into the playoffs. So why not throw him out there? If he doesn't fit in this guard room, then I wonder what's his position here in Washington. I mean, why don't you just send him down to the go-go? We'll just have to see.
I was going to say I would be proponent of honestly sending him to the go-go because he's not getting any run right now on the NBA floor, and he needs reps. He's obviously going to need to fill out, get a little bit bigger as time goes on if he wants to succeed at this level. But in order for him to get better as a playmaker and improve his skills in the catch-and-shoot opportunity, something he was trying to work on in the Summer League, he needs those reps with the go-go. We know they're utilizing the go-go for guys like Will Riley right now, Jameer Watkins, vice versa. But I don't know why A.J. Johnson hasn't gotten that same type of treatment right now because he's really just on the bench as a body at this point. And it seems like that's become one of these things where you have this guy as a body. Tristan Vukcevic is like a random body that will play only minutes selectively when they feel like the situation is right. Like against Houston, they tried to go double big for the first time all season because they were getting so dominated on the glass and they needed to make some sort of adjustment. So you saw Vuk get some minutes there. Then you saw him get some minutes in the fourth quarter of the Brooklyn game because Sarr was in foul trouble and Bagley needed a breather, so they went to Vukcevic in that situation. But the inconsistencies in the rotation have been a byproduct of them trying different things out. So now that the rotation allegedly is going to cut down, it's going to be interesting, as you say, like who is that odd man out and how does this allow certain players to gel? Maybe they're going to start to get more comfortable with one another because they're going to have some more continuity in that lineup. I think it's super important, especially for the offensive side of the basketball. You know what? Actually, scratch that. I think defense, it's more important to find continuity with who you have on the floor because communication is so important. I think that's been a big problem for what they've been doing defensively. Getting beat backdoor, not communicating on switching on screens, hedging, all of that stuff I think is something that can be ironed out with a little more reps and more continuity on the defensive side. And then offensively as well, finding out what guys' strengths are and maybe you could see some more creativity come offensively if they establish a core group of players that are consistently playing on the ball within this offensive system. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how that changes over time because right now you've lost 11 games in a row. You lost by double digits 9 times this year already. You're not in a good spot. You got to see something different. You got to see new looks. So, I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks to seeing what this team brings to the table, especially considering they just had the players-only meeting.
Yeah, I generally wonder if that's going to make a difference, Ben. Not in terms of winning, but just being competitive. You're going in there after a game where you lost to the Brooklyn Nets, and you got to look yourselves in the mirror and say, what's our identity right now? We have lost 11 in a row, and we lost to a team that's arguably in the same tier as us as of right now without their best scorer in Cam Thomas. If you're a Wizards fan, you just have to realize that I think we all ultimately think, hopefully, that the second half is going to look different with a lot of these young guys getting more minutes. But, I mean, as of right now, it's just the lack of team development. It's not there. I understand this team plays fast, but defensively, again, the second chance points, man. I mean, we're getting killed off the glass every single night. And I understand that was a tactic where Will Dawkins didn't put much depth in the forward and center position. But, man, for a guy in Alex Sarr, for a guy in Tristan Vukcevic, you have the bodies. Why not go out there and see what you got if you put Vooch and Sarr at the same time on the floor? It shouldn't take down by 30 against Houston and getting killed off the glass to put those guys in. That's just my take, and I'm hoping this team figures it out, Ben, because, again, these next couple of games, outside of Indiana, these are really competitive games or tough games to win.
I agree. I especially agree with your take on the double big thing. I don't know why it took so long to finally see that lineup, but maybe we'll see some more of it. Let's take our first break. When we come back, Will Riley is back with the Washington Wizards after a quick stint with the Go-Go. What is his minutes going to look like? We'll talk about it. When Skims announced they were making underwear for men, the reaction made perfect sense. People have been talking about Skims comfort for years. Most guys, though, stick to whatever they've been buying since college. The same fits, same waistbands that roll, and a whole lot of settling. Skims Men's changes that. One upgrade, and it's obvious why everyone's been talking. They're designed to feel good, or fit right now, and actually stay put. No slipping, no sagging, no adjusting, just genuinely great underwear that makes you feel confident and comfortable. My favorite pair is the Stretch 5 Boxer Brief. It stands out because it's soft, supportive, and comfortable throughout the entirety of the day. They don't ride up, they don't lose their shape, and they hit exactly what they're supposed to on the thigh. Whether you're working out, traveling, or just hanging out at home, these feel better than anything you've used before. I didn't expect underwear to be a game changer, but Skims completely surprised me. Shop Skims Men's now at skims.com, and when you place your order, choose podcast in the post survey. and select our show from the drop-down menu to let them know we sent you. Plus, the Skims holiday shop is open, so if you're looking for the perfect gift this season, Skims has you covered. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Will Riley is back with the Washington Wizards. Just a quick 2-game stint with the Capital City Go-Go. He exploded in his debut in the G League, 25 points, 7 assists, and then he was ejected from the game. In the second one, had a flagrant 2 foul after putting up 17 points, so did not get to play the remainder of that one. Dawkins, when he was on, he was asked about that. He said, didn't really think it was warranting a flagrant 2 foul, but I was happy that he was getting after it. He was showing his physicality and playing aggressive. One thing that stood out to me from Dawkins' comments about Will Riley is they said they sent him there because they wanted to get him on-ball reps to see him utilize his playmaking skills. Now that's interesting because we planned on getting into the state of the point guard position for this Wizards team here in 2025 in this segment, Abdullah. And Will Riley got sent to the G League because they want to see him as a primary ball handler, to see if he can kind of mold himself into that Keyshawn George role. Now that he's back at the NBA level, don't expect it to be long necessarily. Dawkins said directly, expect him to be with the Wizards for a little. They're kind of it seems like it's going to be this back and forth thing, depending on maybe the situation, like who they have upcoming on the schedule. But I expect him to get minutes. If he's going to be up on the NBA roster, I made the case for it. Like, you sent him to the Go-Go because he wasn't getting minutes on the NBA roster. If you're going to have him up for these short stints, he needs to get minutes. He needs to get these on-ball reps you're talking about, because you got to take the weight off the shoulders of Keyshawn George a little bit. And this is a tough situation, a tough ask for a rookie player like Will Riley. He's got the slight frame. He's going to need to fill out a little bit as his career goes along here in Washington. But this is going to be interesting because the Wizards severely lack playmaking ability. The best playmakers in the team have far and away been Keyshawn George and, for the most part, Alex Sarr passing out of the short roll. And that's not really sustainable to bring you winning basketball. And the goal for this Wizards team is not to find winning basketball. They want to compete more. They want to see what they have in terms of individual development. So Will Riley, utilizing his playmaking skill, is going to be part of one of those measuring sticks they want to see in individual development. I really expect him to get some good on-ball reps here over the next couple games, if that is indeed the case, Abdullah.
Yeah, when it comes to the point guard position, I think going into the season, they wanted to see if Bub could fill that role, but ultimately it just hasn't looked good. And like we're always saying, I think he's better at the combo guard role. And Will Riley, a guy who's a very good shot maker, like you mentioned, is still very young, thin, needs to fill out his frame. I think he's a guy where if you need someone to go out there and do some playmaking, see what you have in him. Again, right now, you're not a competitive team, so you're trying to see where does this guy fit in the role when this team when this team starts competing in the future. And like you mentioned, Keyshawn George is also plays defense, and he's a really good defensive player. So he's going to be tired from just playing point guard. And the point guard position, it's a very difficult position to develop, Ben. I mean, you're basically the eyes and ears on the floor. And I think for Will Riley, if you're this cluster of wings that you have on this roster and you need someone to play that guard role, and clearly we don't have a guard here right now, a pure point guard, a guy who can set up our young guys like Alex Sarr in a pick and roll, like Trey Johnson, maybe Will Riley could be that guy. Again, it would be cool to see if he can go out there and dish some dimes, but we'll just have to see. And the opportunities that he'll get on ball, I can't wait, because again, his playmaking, I didn't think was talked about much going into the draft. It was all about his shot making. But if he can develop playmaking skills alongside his shot making with that size, I mean, he could be potentially really lethal in the future.
He's toolsy, for sure. He's got a lot of different skill sets. I necessarily didn't even know a lot about him because I watched him seldomly in the Big Ten Conference last year. I saw him play when he played against Maryland, obviously. Knew he was a good player, knew he was a great, tough shot maker, like his head coach Brad Underwood said. But this playmaking ability has kind of been a revelation for me that took course in the preseason. I was kind of like, we don't have a lot of playmakers on this roster. That's evident, but Will Riley has shown me some flashes that maybe he has the ability and just a skill set, the basketball IQ, to be a decent playmaker at this level. And I'm not saying that he's going to be a long-term fix at that position. I think the Wizards are absolutely going to have to address the pure point guard position some way or another in this offseason, whether that's drafting a guy in the lottery this year to be your point guard of the future. Peterson, Michael Brown, if they fall out of the top 3 or something like that, those could be options. I mean, maybe Brown's even better as a pure point guard option compared to Peterson, who would just be like your elite scorer that can break down the defense as well. Kind of a combo guy, but maybe a little bit better at breaking down the defense than Bub would be. I don't know. But it's obviously not a long-term fix. But what the Wizards are trying to do this year and have guys develop individually, I'm all for Will Riley getting some reps as a point forward, kind of like Keyshawn George is for this team. One, I think it could help him develop just as a overall player, trying to get his own shot, call his own number at times, but also see him develop his game in different ways we didn't expect from him, because there's a lot of people in that building right now that are super high on Will Riley. They think he's got some of the most upside and feel out of, like, a lot of people say, like, this is a guy Dawkins drafted, like, purely over feel, because they have a gut feeling this guy could be a super great player because he has a lot of different tools that they can utilize in his game and his great frame. Maybe that's the situation you see right here. I'm just going to be kind of frustrated if you see him come back up to the NBA level here and not see him get some adequate minutes. I know the rotation is slimming down a little bit from what we heard from Dawkins today, but I hope Riley is at least part of that plan to get some reps here going forward.
And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually Will Riley takes minutes over a guy like Corey Kispert, who, again, we understand what Corey Kispert's ceiling is in the league, a really good guy that can shoot and try to give you defensive mindset, but I don't know how much he can offer you compared to Will Riley, who maybe the point forward capability is there. And we'll just have to see. It's funny, Ben, because speaking of the point guard position, I've seen some Wizards fans on social media, which they're always throwing out some crazy takes. They want to go out there and bring Chris Paul back to D.C. I know his tenure here was very short, but he hasn't been playing in L.A. I've seen the idea of trading for Trae Young. I just don't think any of those guys is happening. It's not a possibility.
That's wild. That is wild. All right, Wizards and Timberwolves tomorrow. Let's preview that next here on Locked On Wizards. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company's buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS, that's sad. Software as a service. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance, all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. I love how Rippling removes the bottlenecks and busy work that slow everything down. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access. It runs automatically and perfectly in sync. It's seriously simple to use, and it gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything they touch. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or just fill the gaps in with your software stack, Rippling can do it all. Right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/LockedOnNBA. Learn more at rippling.com/LockedOnNBA. That's rippling.com/LockedOnNBA for 6 months free. Wizards and Timberwolves tomorrow from Minnesota. Game gets underway at 8 p.m. We'll have the coverage for you here on Locked On Wizards as always post-game. Man, the Timberwolves have been one of my favorite teams to watch over the last couple of years because they got the alien in Ant Edwards. Dude is just so good, so prolific. He can elevate a team at any single moment in the game. The kind of way you'd see somebody take over a game, the way Cade Cunningham did in the fourth quarter, shooting up a whole bunch of shots for the Pistons last week. That's the kind of player I see in Anthony Edwards, and he's been doing that at the highest level now for a couple of seasons. He's so fun to watch. That team, very, very exciting, very talented offensively. And for a Wizards team that's been the worst defensive team in the NBA, we're going to see what kind of adjustments they have to try to compete on that level with this Minnesota team, Abdullah.
Yep. Anthony Edwards, Ben, like you mentioned, he's a superstar. I think a guy who can just take over the game at any moment, a guy you want to take that last second shot to win the game. And on top of that, I think rebounding might be another issue against Minnesota, Ben, where you got Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, Julius Randle, who's a bruiser. Defensively, Jaden McDaniels, not Jaden Daniels. McDaniels is really good off the perimeter. So I think it's going to be a really good test for these young guys. If you can find a way to keep up with the squad, I mean, Dante DiVincenzo can light it up from three-point land. Mike Conley is a very good veteran as well. And they also have Rob Dillingham, who I was a big fan of going into the draft process. So we'll just have to see how they can compete. If you can find a way to limit Anthony Edwards, I think, Ben, I was going to ask you, do you think Keyshawn George should be given that assignment of guarding or Bilal?
Honestly, probably Bilal gets the assignment, if I had to guess. Hopefully, whoever's on him can stay out of foul trouble.
Yep.
Because that's been such a big problem for this team. And maybe you see George match up with a guy like Naz Reid. They need to defend the three-point line much better than they have, because that's been the real Achilles heel for this Wizards team, is they allow so many wide-open catch-and-shoot opportunities. And with, the names that you mentioned just a moment ago, Minnesota will knock down plenty of wide-open three-point shots. They're not going to be a team you can leave open from that distance. With that being said, it's going to make it really tough to stop them offensively. Three-point percentage this year, down maybe a little bit for Minnesota. As a team, 35%, 13th best in the NBA, so probably some room to grow for them, but they can get hot at any moment, and they can really devastate you with the three ball.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. Julius Randle is averaging nearly 25 points a game off 7 rebounds and 6 assists. Mm-hmm. So he's a guy that can definitely give you some trouble, especially since this Minnesota team can go on runs. So Coach Keefe has to find a way to manage the timeouts well, but also not let the game slip away when Minnesota's on a 20-0 run and you still haven't called a timeout.
And actually, I gotta correct myself real quick. I was looking at the Minnesota defensive stat, not offensive. Their three-point percentage is close to 39, and they're 5th best in the NBA, so it makes it a little more challenging. Effective field goal percentage, they're second in the NBA, just under 58%. They're in the top 5 for plenty of offensive categories. Shooting percentage itself at just under 50% for Minnesota offensively. One of the better offenses. The Wizards are one of the worst defenses in the NBA. They are the worst defense in the NBA, not even one of. So they're going to have their hands full tomorrow night. That's not even a question. It's going to be a matter of, can they string together some stops? Can they get some individual efforts that maybe encourage you, help you compete? If you get a great defensive effort from Bilal, from Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr defends the rim to the best of his ability, goes out and rebounds against Gobert, maybe you could look at the positive from that game if you see some more individual strides, and hopefully the team, as a result, can compete a little bit more. Because I think right now, with how the Wizards are playing, how they've been playing over this run, you can't expect them to have a chance to win any game. But there's a reason they go out there between the lines and play every single game. Anyone can win on any given night. The way the Wizards are playing right now, they have to be better to even have a chance to be in this basketball game. So hopefully they find themselves in a position to compete, not necessarily win, but just compete. Don't be an embarrassment the way it's been the last couple of games. That's all I can really say for that.
Just go out there and have fun, right, Ben? I think Rudy Gobert and Alex Sarr, 2 French guys going at it, that's going to be a fun matchup. Sarr in the past, we've seen where he took advantage, or not took advantage, but he played pretty well against guys who don't move that fast in the center position. That gives him an advantage compared to other guys in this league. Last season, you saw how he matched up against Nikola Jokic. And, I mean, miracles do happen. This Wizards squad, the limited amount of wins they got last season, they swept the Denver Nuggets. So there's a possibility where they come out in Minnesota and guns blazing, play defense. If you can somehow limit Anthony Edwards to less than 30 points, keep Julius Randle in check, I can see this game coming down to the wire. But again, it's all about giving effort, and if you're going to get killed off the glass, it's going to be a long night.
I want to see Sarr take it at Rudy Gobert. That's a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, one of the best defenders of this generation. We'll see if Sarr can keep up that physicality, that aggression we've seen from him through the first 3 weeks of the season. That's been a strong point for him. You don't want to see him shy away from a tough competition. And so far, that's been his MO so far this year, where he hasn't shied away from taking it to the chest of anyone. I want to see what he has against a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. This is a big measuring stick game, I think, for Alex Sarr to really showcase the development that we've seen from him offensively, because the rate he's finishing the basketball at the rim is so much better here in year number 2 than year number 1. Let's see it against one of the best to defend the rim.
Yeah, and I think Trey Johnson, a game where Last game, we didn't see much of him. I think he was only given 17, 18 minutes, Ben. I was a little frustrated about that. A lot of Wizards fans were. Go out there and run some sets for the man. I mean, you can't just expect him to just give him the ball and just dribble and create your own shot. He can do that, but you got to give him some opportunities where it's coming off the dribble. And I understand you need a point guard in some cases for that matter, but right now you just don't want to limit this kid because he's so freaking special. You see what the Wizards or the Hornets are doing for their guy Concanipoli. You see how Dallas is handling their situation with Cooper Flag, and Dallas is losing a lot of games as well, just like us. So we have to figure out a way to give your young guys the ball. And it all starts with Trey Johnson, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly. You had the most explosive 6-point game in NBA history against the Brooklyn Nets. How are you going to go out there and play offensively? Defensively, you're going to be given the assignment of guarding Anthony Edwards, who's a superstar, and it's going to be difficult. But offensively, how are you going to attack this Minnesota team?
We've seen the flashes for Bilal. He can be assertive. He has some of the most explosive hops on this team for sure, but he's got to assert himself. That's going to be a big thing for him going forward. Wizards Timberwolves tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Be on the lookout for our post-game coverage. Of course, we'll be live after the game here on YouTube, and then, of course, it'll be out on all platforms after that. We thank everybody for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every single day. Your best Washington Wizards coverage Monday through Friday, year-round, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. The #1 sports podcast network in the nation. For your second listen, check out Locked On NBA Fantasy Basketball. If you need to get your lineup right, Josh Lloyd is your guy. For my co-host, Abdullah Ayubi, I'm Ben Strober, DC Family. Talk to you tomorrow.